everyone, I'm Bernardo. Welcome to Career Insights, where you can find products that are designed to help make your life easier. If you're first time here and are interested in getting access to daily deals on kitchen appliances, home electronics, pet products, and exclusive author interviews, then start now by clicking that follow button to be notified when we go live. We have Elizabeth Harrin joining us today. I'm super excited that she's here with us. If you don't know her or not familiar with her, Elizabeth is an author and mentor who helps project managers and their teams get more done with less stress. Elizabeth is a dear friend and colleague who has written 6 books about project management, which we will discuss today. And she also writes for the award-winning blog, A Girl's Guide to Project Management, which can be found on girlsguidetoprojectmanagement.com. So let's welcome Elizabeth here. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, happy Friday. And thank you for joining us from, well, you're in England. And so thank you for joining us late, actually, for you. It's afternoon for us. So I wanted to just first introduce yourself to our audience, get to learn more about who you are. But before you do, I wanted to also thank Bethany Bain for also following us. I know she's watching us here live. Thank you, Bethany. But let's get going and learn a little bit more about your background. How did you get started into project management?
Okay. Oh, that was a long time ago. I know there's typically we talk about project managers as being either accidental project managers and they come to project management late in their career, but that was not me. I found project management relatively early. I did an English literature and linguistics degree at university and had no idea what that would lead to as a career. So I did what we call in the UK the milk round, where you apply to different big companies and they stick you on a graduate training scheme. So I did that for American Express, and one of the placements that I had while I was on that scheme was in a department which basically did project management. And suddenly this light bulb went off. It was like, I can make lists and be paid for it. I can tell people what to do and I can organize things, and all the things and skills that I had felt were my natural strengths, except I'd never really realized there was a job that involved those before. Suddenly I realized that project management was something I could do and enjoy doing, and that in the corporate world there were so many different jobs that nobody ever told you about. So I found project management quite early, and as soon as that graduate scheme finished and I was able to look for a new job, I found a position that was project management, and the rest is history.
So hold on one second. You mentioned that you started at did you work in Amex House in Brighton?
I did, yes.
You did? I did not know that. Wow, okay. Because I was there since in 2009, I think it was, and 2006 for a couple of years in Brighton. So that's pretty awesome. So we both have roots with American Express.
Yes.
And so you've been focusing on project management for quite some time. Tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to write A Girl's Guide to Project Management.
Well, a couple of reasons, really. The first, if I'm truly honest, is that I wanted to write a book before I was 30. So I looked at what I could write about and I figured, write what you know is what they tell authors, and I couldn't write fiction. So I figured I needed to write a book about project management. But as a young woman in an organization where I see people running massive, great big projects, and that wasn't me. So what could I write about that I had credibility for? So I created one of these, Project Management in the Real World was my first book. And that's a set of case studies and stories about what people do as project managers and some of the situations that we come up against. So I think it was one of the first books that wasn't methodology led, in terms of it doesn't talk about the beginning of the project and then you do these things. It kind of dips in and focuses on skills and takes you all over the place. So that came out just about a month after my 30th birthday, I suppose it was published. And when I was researching, what do you do? What do authors do to help tell the world about their books? People said you should start a blog. So I thought, okay, I ought to do that then, shouldn't I? So that was 2006, maybe January 2006. I started cataloguing my experiences. I was working in France at the time, so I was writing about what it was like to be an expat and a project manager in at AXA. I worked for an insurance company over there, and it was that really. But the angle I took, which I guess is really more interesting, was I was looking around my department where I worked, and we had easily over 50% female project managers and women in senior jobs. And yet every conference I went to, every copy of Project Management Today that I looked at, and remember, this is a long time ago now, and things are better these days. And it was all, little photos of men on the conference brochures, little photos of men in the bios of the articles that I was reading. And I thought, there is space for someone to talk about what it's like to be a working woman as a project manager, and things that we do that our experience of working life is different to that of a man. It just, things like I would take my shoes to work, my high heels, I would take them to work in a bag and then wear trainers on my commute. And I'm sure you see that in New York all the time. None of my male colleagues have a drawer full of shoes at the desk. So it was just that, that makes it sound really sexist and parochial, doesn't it? That's not how I meant it to be at all.
No.
There was a kind of a human take on what it was like to be working as a project manager, as opposed to a truly academic or software led or anything like that. Just my daily life. That's how I started out documenting it, and it grew from there into what it is today.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that there has been a lot of progress that's been made within the project management field as it relates to diversity and inclusion. I just think that, when we both started, because, I started also quite a while, so I don't want to age us, or myself at least anyway. There has definitely been a lot of opportunities to be inclusive. So one of your blogs really is focusing on that voice, which I think is pioneering, because if you think about it, back then there really weren't many platforms that allowed for, or not say allowed for, but there weren't many platforms that really spoke about some of the differences that exist in that particular space. And when it comes to project management, you mentioned one thing also, which is around how many people go and they're the accidental project manager. And we'd love to get your thoughts as well, as when you see project managers in general, are they all in one specific field? Like, are they all in technologies? Are they in construction? What are your thoughts as far as where this particular type of discipline exists?
It's everywhere. I mean, the majority of people that I mentor work in small to medium-sized organizations with quite low levels of project management maturity, because obviously, I suppose if you're reaching out to someone for help and guidance, and you want someone to hold your hand through it, then you don't have anybody in your own organization who can do that for you. So I think the larger the organization doesn't always follow, but often because of the investment that they have to put into their projects to do the change they want to deliver, they have to do it in a more robust way with a project management office set up. So, but in terms of industry, I mean, I spent 12 years in healthcare. Before that, I was in financial services with AXA and American Express. And it's everywhere. So I was on Clubhouse Room today, and we were talking about architects, construction, engineering. And I've also talked to people who are legal project management specialists working in the field of law, in hospitality, catering. If you have wedding planners, executive assistants, they all use project management skills, and you'll find them in any industry. So different industries have different levels of maturity and adoption and approaches that they use. So if you talk to IT project managers, they'll understand the language of Agile often because of the way that software development process has developed over the last 10 years. And you might not get that level of understanding or acceptance or adoption of different processes in a different type of industry. But project management is a broad church. It covers a whole range of different disciplines.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that are just tuning in and watching us, we have Elizabeth Harrin, who has written several books focusing on project management. Super excited that she's here with us today on Amazon Live. And if you're watching us on YouTube, Twitter, or on Facebook, feel free to come over to Amazon Live, where we'll be talking more about the books that she's written and get more into detail as to how does it really help someone who is not the official project manager, but is actually doing project management, which we were talking about right now, which is pretty much project management exists everywhere. And it's a matter of thinking certain pieces through to be able to get what the work that you're looking to get accomplished, whether you're a wedding planner, you're an architect, whether you are in construction or in technologies, there's always projects that we have, and how does that actually get defined? So I think those are a couple of things as well that definitely help really clear the air in regards to what the focus is in regards to project management itself. And as you can hear, I have an old school phone that just went off right now live. Like, why do you have a phone?
I'm sure it was really important.
I highly doubt it. It's probably some spam calls that I get. I got it as a part of a bundle package, but that's too much information for everybody. So that being said, if you're watching us, so Elizabeth, love to get to know a little bit more about the books that you've written and how do they really help those that are going into project management. I put a few that you have written overall in the carousel. So I'm going to share it with you on the screen so that you can see it. Let me just give it a second. And for those that are watching, feel free to ask any questions in the chat section so that we can make sure we answer those questions for you. And let me just make sure I have this right. I think I do. Just have to move certain things around. Give me 1 second. It's always fun when going live. Let me see. So one of the first books, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for those that can watch. Let me take this caption off. It's always fun when you're doing these live streams. What's the best way to make things look a little more professional? So I put here the shortcuts to success and love to get to learn a little bit more about this. I love this book, and there's a reason why I love this book. Do you know why I love this book, Elizabeth?
Is it the ants?
It's the ants and the forward. You forgot. The forward is by this special person.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes, we need to promote that.
We do. So tell us a little bit more about the book itself. How does it help folks? And I think we also have a question. So if you don't mind letting us know, good. I'm going to look at the question in the meantime.
Okay. So Shortcuts to Success was the second edition of this one, Project Management in the Real World, and it splits into various different chunks. So it talks about how do you manage the schedule, how do you manage yourself as a leader, how do you manage your team, how do you manage your budget, how do you manage project scope. So it covers those 5 areas, and in fact I think it's split down into ebooks. So if you just really were interested in budget management, for example, you can just grab the ebook version on budget, but then you wouldn't get the amazing foreword. So I don't think that's included in all the ebooks. But the reason I did it that way is because I wanted it to be the mentor on the shelf. When I had a challenge, I had a mentor I could go to, and now I do that role for other people. And I wanted it to be something that you could say, my team doesn't believe in what I'm doing, or I don't have enough money, or what do I do if ... And you can go to the book, you can look up the question, and you can sort of hear a story about someone who was in that situation, and then read the theory part about what you can do to get yourself out of it, or to work within that. And it's designed really, I think, just to distill loads of different people's experiences down into bite-sized chunks that people can learn from, because so much of what we do as project managers relies on our professional judgment. And how do you get that unless you've got someone to talk to and share ideas from and learn from their wisdom and expertise of who's gone before you? So if you don't have anybody, then I wrote the book that I wished I'd had when I was starting out.
Yeah, I love it. And I agree with you 100% when it comes to really crystallizing some of the concepts that are related to project management. Sometimes we over-engineer it with very complicated language, and sometimes having stories allows us to just really bring some of that to home. And before I kind of go forward, I did want to acknowledge Sweet Add Harmony. Basically no question, but this individual said that they wanted to just say hi to you, Elizabeth, that they had a conversation on several occasions several years ago before they retired. So I'm not really sure the person's name, but the handle is Sweet Add Harmony. So thank you, Sweet Add Harmony, for being able to contribute and saying hi to Elizabeth. And so when we think about, you mentioned something also that's really critical is mentorship. So you are also a mentor to many project managers. Why do you think that mentoring project managers is very important?
Well, I think there's a big difference, isn't there, between mentoring and coaching?
Yes.
And I think the role of the coach is a certified role. It comes with a deep responsibility to the person that you're working with, and your role is more to facilitate them finding their route through the problem. There is a great place for coaching in the world. It is not my place. I am not certified, and I am very opinionated. So I would rather use my background and expertise to tell people what to do. I think is that wrong? But I often say, so people book a call with me, we sit down, we talk about their problem, and we come up with a plan together. So I'll listen, I'll advise, I'll suggest. And I think the role of mentoring is that of a critical friend, someone who is definitely on your side, who believes you, who can help you work through some of the blockages, and who is that little bit ahead of you in terms of their career journey, so they can say, oh yeah, when that happened to me, I did this, or have you thought about this, or what would happen if you approached it like this? I mean, it's not as if I write out a plan of exactly what they need to do and give it to them. It's very collaborative discussion, and obviously they know their work environment much better than I ever would. But I can draw from my experience and share. And I'm very grateful to the mentors that I had on early in my career, and still do, who provided me with that level of critical friend and somebody who could listen and advise. And now I'm privileged to be able to provide that for other people.
And I love the fact that you made that distinction between mentorship and coaching, because you're right, when it comes to the coaching world, and we'll get to that also when we talk a little bit more about the book around Impassa Syndrome that you've written, I think that there isn't really a full understanding as to what coaching is. I think people confuse it with psychotherapy or anything that's related to psychiatry, when it really isn't. It's a completely separate space. And mentorship, I also agree with you. I like the fact that when you are a mentor, you have the freedoms of leveraging some of your past experiences to really collaborate and come up with strategies that will help that person be able to address whatever issues that they're facing when it manages projects. And before I go any further, there was a MW was on the chat and just basically wanted to say that I believe it's a he, sorry to drop off, that he had an unplanned meeting. So I'm not sure who MW is, but thank you for being able to watch as well. And so when it comes to mentorship, one of the things I was curious to get your thoughts on is, how does one really find being mentored? Because I have my own thoughts on that, but I'd love to get your thoughts on when you're thinking about mentees and mentor relationships. Sometimes it's a bit forced, and I'd like to see, what have you found to be like the successful elements of mentoring itself?
I think you need to want it on both sides. And the mistake I made early on in my career was just asking someone if they'd be my mentor. And she was so flattered. She said yes. But actually, in real life, she didn't have the time. And I then moved to a different role. We never caught up really properly, and it just didn't work. It fizzled out. But when we used an internal company scheme, and if you have within organizations, if your company offers you a matching program or some kind of placement with a mentor, then I would definitely recommend people take that. And I feel that it's got to be a good connection between the people, and you need to be able to like them and want to listen to what they have to say if you're looking for a mentor, and then to have a conversation with them and see where it goes, because you may well find that they might be a lovely person but perhaps don't have the skill set to support you, or perhaps they might have the skill set but actually the personality doesn't jive with what you want to get out of the relationship. And that goes both ways as well. But I think the biggest thing is making sure you've got enough time, and that your mentor has got enough time, because that's critical if they can't be there. And often what I do is just a 1 hour troubleshoot, come in, let's see how far we can get in an hour. And often if you're a mid-career professional or you're relatively experienced, you don't need more than that, because there's one particular challenge that you're facing. It doesn't have to people think of mentoring as some kind of like long-winded 2-year engagement where you have to sign up to something and it's going to be forever. It doesn't have to be that. It could just be coffee with a peer of your manager and talk through a difficult problem, or ask about getting a promotion or something like that within your organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is a bit more of a formality that's been created around the mentorship concept, but in reality, it is a matter of figuring out how to best work in a partnership with someone that either you know or you don't know. And it's all about relationship building, because if we really think about project management, that's really what business we're in. We're in the business of managing relationships, managing teams of people who probably don't want to be there, who are volunteered. So you have to learn how to influence without authority. And so there's a whole host of other skill sets that really become very critical and important to succeed as a project manager. And so that kind of leads me into your other book, which is the collaboration tools for project managers and how to choose and get started and collaborate with technology. So what inspired the spirit behind this book? And it looks like it's also endorsed by PMI, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
It was published by PMI. And that happened because way back in the day when the internet was just a young thing, PMI didn't really have a massive, great big social media presence. And people like me, I had a blog, there were other project management bloggers and podcasters around at the time, and PMI created this thing called the New Media Council, which was bringing us all together so we could suggest and advise on what PMI could be doing with social media. And we came together as a group as the New Media Council and did a presentation at one of the PMI global congresses in the States, and we talked about virtual work and collaboration tools and social media and how you could use all of those things as project managers. And honestly, the room was absolutely packed. There were people standing at the back, and we were astounded because we lived and breathed this thing. You know, we wrote blogs, we did podcasts, we did lots of stuff on the internet and didn't think about it for a second. But 15 years ago or 10 years ago, however long it was, that was quite radical. And if you think back, it's not been that long since we've had this culture of very online things. So anyway, the book came about as a first off, it was called Social Media for Project Managers, and it was published by PMI, and it kind of encapsulated all of those things. And it was about how do you make the best of new technology as it was then. Obviously, that became out of date very quickly, and we needed a new version of it. Collaboration Tools for Project Managers was the second edition because it focused more on not so much any particular tool, but on how as a team do you choose what tool to do? How do you identify what problems you're struggling with so that you know what technology to implement into the team? And then how do you do that implementation? Because moving people from not using a software product to using a software product in the way that you want them to get some business value is actually quite a big piece of change management. So the book is really more around how do you move to using collaboration tools effectively as a team.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that even today, you still have organizations that rely on Excel as, for example, to build their project plans, or Microsoft projects. And there are a whole host of companies that have attempted to create the all-in-one type of bundle. And being in this space, I don't know if you found anything, but I have not found one. And I actually like to get your thoughts. Have you found anything that really is robust enough to do like that PMO reporting or the aggregate reporting as a tool when it comes to collaboration with project managers?
There are tools I like, but the ones that I think are good are also at the high end of expense. And then when you're buying them on a software as a service basis, they become quite expensive. And I run a Facebook group, and often the tool questions come up pretty much every week. But often it's, I have a team of 3 people. What can I use? I need something that's free. My company wants me to produce a report, but I can't do it in Excel, and I don't know. There's a big investment in setting up a tool the way that you want it to work and for it to support a PMO and reporting. And something very customizable as well is often difficult to find. There are tools where you can customize them to the nth degree, and then that means you need to have somebody in post to do that admin and customization for you. So in my old company, we went down that route, and we chose a good tool, but it needed a lot of maintenance and setup behind the scenes. And we had someone who was doing that, and he left and wasn't replaced. And then suddenly the tool suddenly becomes less important because you can't get the information into it or out of it in the way that you want to. So using tools comes with lots of benefits, but also lots of headaches. And you really have to think through, what do you want? Will this tool do it? Can we sustain it? Do we have the people and the skills and the training to be able to really make the best of the investment?
That's true. And regardless of how many tools you have, it really does boil down to how you communicate and how you're able to, again, not only manage relationships, but also the expectations of stakeholders. So I think the tools is really a way to help facilitate and aggregate data associated with projects. But whether you're using Excel or you're using something that's a bit sophisticated, it's how to be able to leverage all those different tools. So wanted to just welcome those that are just joining us. We are live here with Elizabeth Harrin. We're talking about several books that she's published along the several years, and focusing on just some best practices that she can also share in regards to project management. We just covered some of the project management tools that one can actually be using. Another one that I think would be really helpful to get a better understanding on is this next one that you've written, which is around customer-centric project management, which I love as well. And I have a few thoughts on this, but wanted to just get your thoughts as to what's inspired. And those that are just watching, feel free to put your questions in the chat section. This is a conversation that you're welcome to be a part of. And if you're watching us on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, feel free to come over to careerinsights.live, where we are on Amazon Live. And if you like this content, don't forget to hit that follow button as well. So Elizabeth, let's talk a little bit more about the Customer-Centric Project Management book itself. If you can share a little bit more about the inspiration behind it, and how does it really help those that are in the project management field?
This is one of the books I am most proud of, because for me, it was a game changer to live through the experience of the case study that forms the center of this book, changed the way I think about project management forever. And it probably doesn't sound that radical, but I still find that there's plenty of project managers who only do lessons learned reviews at the end of projects. And with the increasing implementations of Agile and hybrid, I know that is changing, but in purely waterfall and predictive environments, often, and if you read the textbooks, they say do lessons learned and capture lessons learned at the end, which is the antithesis of what this book is all about. So I wrote this with my old boss, Phil Peplow, who was an amazing IT director, and he implemented an approach within the service, the IT service and operations part of our business, which constantly looked at how is the IT operation performing for you, different departments, and are we doing a good enough job? And then we started to think, if we're asking our ongoing customers, our people who use our IT services just on a daily basis, do you have any problems with your telephones or photocopiers or computers? Why are we not asking them the same questions for projects? Why do we wait until the end and do lessons learned and then just rush it? So we started to implement within our project environment a way of asking key project stakeholders every month, how do you think we're doing? And we asked them questions based on what they felt was important as well. So we tailored the questions very much to the key success factors that we thought that as a group we came up with. And they rated us on a scale of 1 to 10, which is actually really quite harsh when you're sitting there with a project stakeholder saying, oh, we've had a bit of a tricky month this month. How do you rate me me and the delivery of the project on a scale of 1 to 10? And they turn around and say 4. And you think, actually, come on, this has been hard. But actually, it's really motivating. It's very transparent. It gives you exactly what you need to do in order to be able to be a 5 next month. And so we wrote this up as a case study, and there's tons of theory in there as well. It was really fun to research it. I know that sounds a bit silly, but from an academic perspective, I really loved putting together something that was so grounded both in practical experience and also backed up by some of the literature as well. And I don't know, I just think more people should be aware of the fact that it's really easy to improve customer satisfaction by putting your customer at the center of your project. And I know I say it out loud, it doesn't even sound very radical, but the amount of people who don't do it is astounding.
You're absolutely right. And I love the fact that the book is focusing on getting intermittent type of feedback along the way, which I think allows you to really set expectations as to what's working and what's not working well within the project itself. And I also like the fact that it is focusing and putting, whether it's the customer or the user first, which is sometimes, even though you're mentioning it's not radical, I cannot tell you, and you probably see that even today, most organizations, or when you're talking about launching new processes or new products or new services or new technologies, they're not looking at the demographics or the usage of that particular user to see how adoption would actually take. Instead, this is the initiative, this is what we think is going to work, and let's see if it sticks. And before I go any further, It looks like Bill Dow. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Hello,
He
Bill.
says, hello, Elizabeth, or hey, Elizabeth. So Bill Dow. And it looks like he's also an Amazon influencer as well. He has a little check mark next to him. So I'd love to get to know Bill at some point as well. So
Bill writes about PMOs.
Oh, does he? Okay, so I definitely need to speak to
Get
Bill.
him on the show.
Yes, because all about PMOs. And I can talk about a lot of things when it comes to PMOs. A lot of great stuff, and I think a lot of things that I think can definitely help PMOs survive, because they usually tend to be short-lived for one reason or another. One thing I was going to mention is, so when you were doing these studies in regards to customer-centric, have you noticed a shift in actually being more user-focused, more user-centric when it comes to adoption? Because project failure is a big issue with a lot of companies. So we'd like to get your thoughts as to what trends have you seen in that space?
Yes, it's interesting you asked that, because today I've been working on the research for a presentation I'm doing later in the year at a conference about the trends in project management. And one of the things that I've highlighted is the more you involve the customer, the better the outcome, because they are more involved in the process. And there's some marketing research actually that shows that when you customize your process and you customize your product, customers who buy the product are then happier with the outcome, more so than they would be if they'd gone for the non-personalized version. So think monogrammed handbags and stuff like that. And I think that's the same attitude that we could take within project management, is if we provide a customer-centric, user-focused experience, we get better adoption, because people feel that they have had more of a stake in it and the output is more relevant to them. And even if they're getting the same stuff that every other department is getting, it feels like we've listened and we've cared and we've delivered something that they really want. And I think that I couldn't tell you off the top of my head any research that directly links that beyond anecdotal conversations, but I feel that the more you involve the users, the more likely it is that you will get adoption. But with your change management hat on, is that what you see as well?
I do. So a couple of things, like even if you think about the most successful apps that exist out there, whether it's Instagram or even like a TikTok or even Clubhouse, one of the things, and if I don't know if you've seen the show on Netflix, Social Dilemma, it breaks it down really well in regards to the science behind, and interestingly enough, they use my type of psychology, industrial organizational psychology, to understand behavioral patterns that will result in someone actually staying on the app a really long time. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because the science is there. There is a lot of data. People worry about data privacy. They're not really looking. They're looking at your demographics. They're looking at your behavioral patterns to then decide how to create dynamic marketing, for instance. So that's why when you're clicking on something on one app, it's because the person on the other end has decided to create a dynamic marketing ad that, based on whatever you're looking at, it will show you other things. And I think that that's already a trend. Where we fall short for many established institutions is that we're not necessarily always thinking about behavioral patterns, or even understanding the adoption of a particular type of a program. So having different generations in the workforce, for instance, it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other. It just means that when you're doing your change management plan, it may mean there may be more training required for a certain population versus another, based on the exposure or the visibility and adoption of a particular technology. So that's kind of where I see it going, but I do think that there's a long way to go. So I don't know if you've ever seen that documentary, but I definitely recommend it if you've not seen it at all. It's interesting to see. So moving on a little bit more now, when we're talking about another one, we're talking about engaging. So you have another book as well, which is the Engaging Stakeholders.
Yes.
We'd love to learn a little bit more about, stakeholders, I think, is one of the areas that most people don't always remember. I mean, I know that once a month they'll have their review and it's an update. So share a little bit more about how to harness people power by engaging stakeholders on projects.
That title is so full of buzzwords. But what it really tries to talk about is we need to move away from stakeholder management. This idea that you can manage people's behavior by filling in some kind of assessment log about how important you think they are is quite old-fashioned and outdated, especially now we work in very matrixed organizations where all our stakeholders are busy. Instead, we need to rethink how we have that relationship, and instead of it being, I'm going to fill you in on my stakeholder assessment log, and then once a month I will send you an email and it will be a newsletter because I've deemed that people in your stakeholder category like to read newsletters. Instead, we're advocating for a much more engaging approach where you consider stakeholders to be partners in delivery instead of somebody who you do things to, or they provide things to the project. Instead, if we just forget all of that and work with people as humans and create a team and engage people in what we're trying to deliver so that they are excited and enthusiastic and they want to come along with us on the journey, then we get better results. And the book is because that is very easy to say. And actually, when you say, what does engagement look like? What do I have to do to engage someone? Because engage is a rubbish word that doesn't mean anything really. So the book tries to break down what it is that you can do that actually means how do you work with people and gives you practical examples of things that you can do to create that kind of relationship and kind of culture within your project team. Does that answer the question? I kind of forgot what the question was.
No, it does. It does. I think, we tend to, depending on how, and this is why, one of the reasons why I love the concept of project management, or just the whole discipline, because it is about managing relationships. And many times we get stuck on the technicalities and the check boxes that we need to do, that when we're talking about stakeholders, yes, we need to treat everyone, in the interpersonal dynamics are very important. But I also do think that when it comes to organizational politics, that sometimes tends to trip people up when managing initiatives, whether they're not familiar with when one senior executive sponsor leaves, what happens when another one takes over, or if there's a restructure, how does that affect your project? And so by having those dynamics and those relationships, you get to have a better sense as to the importance of the initiative or why certain projects get cut short. So I agree with you 100% that it is about relationships, and it's not always about having a checklist, but I also think it's understanding where people's interests are when it comes to the initiative that you're specifically managing. So I agree 100% there. One thing I wanted to go back to just, so what are your thoughts about this? So regarding Agile, because you have waterfall, you have Agile project management. We'd like to get your thoughts a little bit more on this whole concept of Agile and project management itself.
In what respect?
In regards to whether it's only for IT, or do you think it's outside of IT as well?
I mean, it has its roots in IT. The Agile Manifesto is 10 years old now, and that started out with a group of IT professionals. But the benefits of being able to work in an agile way have extended far beyond that now. And I think that we move really beyond, I think there's a lot of organizations that say they're agile, but that if you spoke to a true agilist, would barely recognize anything that they were doing. So, and a lot of organizations say, oh, we want to be nimble, we want to be agile, but what they really mean is we'll have some daily stand-ups and we'll deliver in increments, but that's not necessarily embracing the whole philosophy of agile. So I think there's a spectrum of agileness, probably with the most effective ways at one end, and then various different hybrid style implementations that work for the organizations, all the way down to predictive methodologies. And I think many people fall somewhere in between. And why not? Why not pick the best pieces? I mean, the example from the Customer-Centric project management book is doing regular lessons learned reviews on a monthly basis. That's the same principle as within Agile of doing retrospectives at the end of every sprint. So, there's things that we can learn and take, and why not fill your toolbox with all the stuff and then pick and choose what works best for every project as you go. So I think Agile does have a place outside of IT is the quick answer.
Well, thank you for that. I agree. I do think that there's a difference between Agile and Agility. And I think sometimes they get mixed. They get confused. And I think many times people are referring to Agility instead of Agile. And when it comes to the concept of Agile, I agree 100%. There are many companies that mention Agile, but they're talking about mini waterfall, which is really still linear in development, but they really want to appear as though they're going through the iterative process of development itself. And I do also believe that not every single technology initiative has to be Agile, like they're production wise. Like if you're talking about business as usual coding, does it need to be Agile? Does it? Not always. There could be ways of being able to still have the waterfall methodology. I think sometimes we're too quick to dismiss some of the traditional ways of coding for the newer ones, but I do think there's a time and a place based on what it is. So one of the things I'd also like to get your thoughts, we were just talking about managing projects. So when we talk about you have a managing project plans, shortcuts to success. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about these ants, because you really love the ants, and I want to know what's going on with the ants, Elizabeth.
Do you know, there's only one book, which is Communicating Change, which was with Bookboon, so I don't even know if that's on Amazon. Apart from them, I have had no other input into book covers. So when you publish with a traditional publisher, the book covers pretty much are taken out of your hands. Hence why the book published by APM has that blur purple swirl thing on the front, because it fits with the rest of their series and it fits with the APM branding. But
this one you mean.
Yeah,
yes,
that one.
Yes, that's right.
I didn't have any say over that. I mean, it's okay, but just not what I would have personally chosen. But there we go. It fits with the series. I think the ants are cute because they symbolize working together as a team to get something bigger done. So that's it really, isn't it? It's, can we get all of these different moving parts together to achieve something, whether it's moving a stick or creating a colony or whatever. It's all about doing something that's bigger than the individual.
You're absolutely right. Actually, when I was going for my degree in industrial organizational psychology, one of the films that we watched, I think it was Ants, it was a cartoon, but it was all about group dynamics. So it was really interesting that you picked up also on the fact that it is all about teamwork. So I think it is a great image. I just wasn't really sure where the connection was until you just explained it. I was like, what's going on with the ants piece?
If it's too obscure, though, that's a problem in itself, isn't it?
It didn't hit me until you wound up explaining it a little bit, like, oh yeah, that makes sense now. But that being said, so managing project plans. So what are the keys, without going into all the details of the book itself? So what are some of the keys to succeeding in managing a project plan? Because sometimes people write the list and then they forget about it. So what has been the best practices that you can share in regards to that?
I think you need to have a clear idea of what it is you're trying to do. So setting those boundaries of scope at the beginning. That can change, obviously, because life moves on as you go. But you've got to start somewhere with a vision of where you're going. And then you create the plan. So you're writing out that list of tasks, like you say, and making the time to do the work. That's really the key, because you know how long a task is going to take, or you can get an estimate from the expert who's going to do the work. But if they don't have the time to do it, then their priorities need to either change if your work is more important, or you need to allow for the fact that they have more priority work and that your work comes later on in the chain and you might not get your work done later. So I think often projects get delayed because of our inability to manage resource availability and to be able to find people to do the work, because people's priorities are often all over the place, often because they don't have clarity around what the strategic goals are, so they find it really hard to prioritize, and they end up doing the work for the person who shouts the loudest.
Yeah, I love that, because I do think that many times when it comes to managing expectations, and it goes back to something we mentioned earlier, you're working with a team of people that don't report into you 9 times out of 10. They are either assigned or volunteered. It's an extra credit project for them. And it's how do you create an environment where they're prioritizing some of this work amongst the 1,500 things that they have on their list to accomplish that really do tie into their goals. So having the ability to build those relationships and help manage expectations, I do think is extremely, extremely important. And yes. So I wanted to then move over to your other book, which is Overcoming Impassa Syndrome, because your social media for project managers. Well, actually, before I do that,
we've covered that one.
Yeah, we
Oh,
can.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we did, right? Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking when I was like, wait, we did kind of cover that as a part of the other
Yeah.
book. So let me start off with this. Impassa syndrome, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, I've being a industrial psychologist, I'm aware of what it is, but I've not really heard so much about it until I actually went onto Clubhouse. Like that has been
Okay.
blown up out of where I think there's a confusion between natural fear and curiosity as it relates to learning a new skill set, which is normal. We all, get nervous about something that we're not new, and it's also depends on if you happen to have a bit more of a perfectionist type of personality, which has to do with control. And I'm not going to go into all that stuff. And then you have the true, which is really called the imposter phenomenon, which is where the imposter syndrome lends itself from. Before we kind of get into that topic, love to understand a little bit more what inspired this particular book, and have you seen that linkage in what you're hearing on that other application? I don't want to go too much into that application because I know we're on Amazon, but wanted to just get your thoughts on that as well as to how that ties together.
I haven't been in conversations where this has come up, really. But I do think with my mentoring work and when I'm delivering training, I do see it, especially from project managers who have all the certifications and all the experience, and they're thinking, can I hold a kickoff meeting? Can I bring the supplier and invite them? Yes, you can. Why are you second even guessing yourself? So there's certainly, especially at the beginning of a project, regardless of how much experience you've got, there's a learning curve, and there's a concern about, do I know enough about this subject matter topic because I haven't worked with these people before? And that's normal, and it can take 3 to 6 months. That sounds like a really long time, but it takes me 3 to 6 months to really get comfortable with a new thing, to the point where I can really feel like I live it and own it and understand everything about it. But in the beginning, you kind of have to wing it a little bit. So I do think there's a mix there between someone who's confident in their project management skills, or should be confident in their project management skills, who is in a new situation, who is feeling nervous, and it's splitting out the two between the things you don't know and will get to know eventually, and the feeling of, I know how to run a project, I know what the process should be, I know that I am a leader in my space and I am the guardian of this process, so I can set up that meeting and I can call the sponsor and I can call these people together, because it's like you say, it's two different things. It's interesting. So the reason that book happened really is, I suppose, I was starting to see more and more people and feel it myself, especially when I went to live in France, because I was second guessing myself so much, speaking in a different language all day. It was so mentally draining, and there was so much I didn't understand about what was going on around me and the culture and the things, even children's TV programs. You forget what's part of your just innate ability to understand things until someone's talking about kids' TV that you've never seen. And that I started to feel imposter syndrome for the work that I was doing, and asking people, writing stories, finding examples. People shared all kinds of different things about how they felt at work, and we don't need to feel that. So the book was really to try to provide some practical strategies for people who felt like they were out of their depth when they shouldn't really feel that way, because they've got the capability and they've done it in the past.
Yeah, and I agree. I do think that the syndrome itself does manifest itself, especially when you have individuals who tend to be very high achievers, and there's a level of self-doubt that comes along the way. And the experience I've had on the other application is a little bit different than what we're referring to. And I think a lot of it has to do with trying to monopolize, or capitalize, I should say, not monopolize, capitalize on individuals' just innate fear when they're doing something new. It's a natural thing when you're doing something new to have a little bit of an insecurity until you've mastered that skill. And so, but if you're still staying in that anxious zone, then that's another area that needs to be discussed a bit further. So, but I do agree with you there. And I think it's a great way of being able to tie in some of the concepts related to what project managers experience, because there really isn't anything there. And what leads me to a question that I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Most organizations have a finance department, a human resource department, a marketing department. I haven't really seen many that it's a PMO or project management department. I think they've attempted it. I've not seen it be, succeed very long. But based on the work that you've seen, how come we don't have like something like a function that says project management?
Some companies do. I mean, American Express had business re-engineering, which I don't know if they still do, but when I was there was a big team of people just doing projects. So I think often it falls within another area. So I think the point that you're making is that we have a HR director, an IT director, a finance director. We don't have a change director or a projects director.
Right.
And we tend to have an IT director or maybe some kind of strategic role, and projects fit underneath those. So hopefully, I mean, we've been having this discussion about why does the delivery of change not have a seat at the executive table? And that conversation has been going on for years. And I think PMI has been doing some good work to elevate the conversation and to make executives understand their role in championing change. But we still I don't see job adverts for projects director who is a board level position. You might head up a PMO with that job title, but you don't necessarily get a seat at the big boys table. But there's hopefully change afoot, I think, as more and more projects move towards, as business as usual becomes more and more project led. There will be no other way to do it than to have oversight across multiple transformation projects and change projects. And as we do more and more work in a project led way, we need that transparency, and the board need that transparency. So hopefully the role will exist at some point. But if anybody is listening who does work in an organization that has a CPO or whatever, it'd be funny if it was called CPO, wouldn't it? Chief Projects Officer. You'd expect them to wear the Star Wars clothes all the time.
All you need is a 3 in there.
But if there's anyone who's listening who does have experience of that, then I'd be really interested in hearing how transformation has happened in that organization to make that role happen, and whether it's a role that has really served the business.
Yeah, for those that are watching, feel free to put that in the chat section. Let us know, or if you have that type of functionality in your organization, and if you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, feel free to join us on Amazon Live. And if you enjoyed this conversation and you like more of these types of conversations, feel free to hit the follow button there. And also, we have covered the majority of books, and I can't wait until the next 6 that you've published. And I hopefully can help with any of that if you ever want a partner in crime in this. But I always love spending time with you. I have just 1 or 2 more questions before we kind of let you go, because I know it's getting pretty late where you are. So I want to be very mindful and respectful of that as well. And those that are watching, feel free to leave any questions in the chat section for Elizabeth, as we're then going to wrap down in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if someone is looking to break into project management itself, what advice do you give them as to the skill sets that are needed to succeed into going into project management?
That's a really interesting question, because the skills that you need today to be successful in the future are not the skills that I needed when I started and did my first project management course all those years ago. Because in the olden days, the emphasis was on, can you manage risk? Do you understand how to create a schedule? Can you help people put together estimates, and can you put together a project budget? If you're looking at what's going to make a difference today, it's going to be much more around, can you bring together a group of specialists and help them create a culture whereby they can do their best work to deliver change. So it's much more emphasis on the interpersonal skills, and you'll see that change happening through the new PMBOK version 7, which is due out later this year, through the new APM guide. The latest Association for Project Management body of knowledge here in the UK is much more interpersonal skill led, because it's really becoming a role where communication, strategic influencing, negotiation, teamwork, leadership, stakeholder engagement, relationship building, all of that stuff is really, really important, because you're trying to do something new and people don't have very much time. They need you to be personable, to be able to operate within the organizational politics. You need to be adaptable, flexible, resilient, all of those things. Having said that, that is a big ask for someone who is new to project management. So I would say, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, I would say make sure your applications have examples of where you can communicate effectively at all levels within an organization.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a starting point. I think many times and especially, and I had this conversation, I think it was yesterday, when people are trying to break into tech, they're so worried or concerned that you have to have the technical skills. And the reality is there are a lot of tech companies that will teach you the technical skills. Long gone are the days where you need to have your master's degree in IT. And it's not to minimize any higher education, but nowadays, many technology companies, for instance, will teach you on the spot, but what they're looking for are those interpersonal skills. Can you communicate at all levels of the organization? And that really does tie in nicely as it relates to project management. And so my last question is really, what's next for you? What's on the horizon? And how do people can get in contact with you in regards to the work that you're doing? I know you have the Girls Guide to PM.com. Where else can people reach out to you? So those are my last two questions for today.
Okay, so what's on the horizon for me? I am doing some great things with my membership community. So I do one-to-one mentoring for people, but I know that's not always practical for people, and perhaps they want a different type of support as well. So I have a membership community called Project Management Rebels, which is a group of people who try to apply project management principles, but in a flexible way to meet the needs of our organizations. So we talk a lot about real world challenges and the struggle. So and we've got some great things planned with that community for later on in the year as well.
Is there a website to that?
Projectmanagementrebels.com. Thank you for asking.
All right.
And I'm might be writing another book. You heard it here first.
Okay, fantastic.
I can't tell you any more than that yet, but give me a couple more weeks and then I will hopefully have something to share on that. So people can get in touch with me. I have the Project Management Cafe Facebook group on Facebook, obviously, or just come by girlsguidetopm.com and just shoot me a message from there. I'd love to hear people's stories and, just connect with some more people. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all the LinkedIn and all the places.
Fantastic. So if you're interested in getting in contact or working with Elizabeth, you can go to projectrebels.com. I'm hoping I spelled that correctly. Or you can go to girlsguidetopm.com as well. So Elizabeth, as always, thank you for being here with us today and for joining us. And this has been a pleasure. So have a great day.
Thank you very much. It's been real fun. So
perfect.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to come back to you in a second, actually, if that's okay. So this ends our time with Elizabeth. Thank you so much, everyone, for being able to join. I wanted to first thank you for those that have been watching this entire time. Again, if you are interested in reaching out, feel free to follow on any of these channels and hit that follow button if you like more of this content. Thank you so much for joining and have a great Friday. And hopefully I'll see you over the weekend. And if there's specific products that you're looking for, feel free to put it in the chat section so that I can keep an eye out for you in case I get to hear about any promotions or deals. Have a great evening and have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. Sorry. Want to just check in with you to see how it went for you. I ended the stream already.